The first sign that the universe was insane came on a Tuesday, and it smelled like ozone and cooked beef. Old Man Hemlock found what was left of his prize-winning Hereford Bessie. Found is a gentle word for it. What he found was the front half of a cow, standing dumbly in the middle of his pasture, as if it was still waiting for its morning feed. The cut was perfect. Not a saw mark, not a burn, just a clean, impossible line right behind the rib cage. The back half was gone. Not dragged away, not eaten, just gone. The dirt and grass where Bessie's hindquarters should have been were untouched. It was as if the universe had used a cosmic eraser and simply rubbed out the rest of her. My name is Jake Riley, and I was the one who heard it coming. I live and work at the Arroyos Observatory, a collection of white domes that look like giant golf balls half buried in the New Mexico dust. My job is to listen. I point a 100-foot metal dish at the sky and listen for whispers from stars that died before our sun was even a flicker of an idea. It's a lonely job, mostly filled with the static hiss of the cosmos, the background radiation of creation. But for the past 6 weeks, I'd been hearing something else. A signal. It was weak, buried deep in the noise, but it was structured. It repeated. It was intelligent. I told my bosses at Caltech, and they told me to double-check my equipment. I told them the signal was getting stronger, that it was shifting its frequency to match ours, like a child learning to mimic a parent's voice. They told me to take a vacation. That Tuesday, the day of the half cow, the signal changed. It stopped being a series of sterile mathematical pulses. It became a voice, not a voice of words, but of raw primal emotion. It was a sound of immense suffocating awe, followed by a feeling of triumphant discovery. I felt it in my teeth, a vibration that had nothing to do with sound waves. Then a new layer was added to the signal. It was a playback. Distorted, choppy, but unmistakable. It was the frantic, high-pitched screaming from an old horror movie. I sat there in the control room, the glow of monitors painting my face, and listened to the sound of some forgotten B-movie starlet, screaming her lungs out, broadcast back at me from the cold, silent depths of interstellar space. And then came one last burst from the source, a clear, concise thought that bloomed in my mind like a black flower. We see, we understand. We are building. That's when I picked up the phone to call the sheriff about the cow. That's when the real screaming started. Sheriff Brody met me at Hemlock's farm. He was a big man, built like a refrigerator, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and left in the sun too long. He listened to my story, his eyes never leaving my face, his expression unchanging. He'd known me since I was a kid who broke into this very observatory on a dare. He'd seen me get my doctorate and come back home to this quiet corner of the world. He probably thought the loneliness had finally gotten to me. "A signal, Jake," he said, his voice a low rumble, like gravel in a cement mixer. "You are telling me some little green men chopped this cow in half because they were watching old movies. I don't know if they're little or green, Brody. I don't know what they are. I just know what I heard. The signal is coming from the direction of Proxima Centauri, but it's not from there. It's closer, much closer, just outside the solar system." "And the screaming?" "It was from a movie," I said, feeling my own words turn to ash in my mouth. "I think it was called The Gaping Maw. 1986. Low-budget slasher flick. A bunch of teenagers get hunted by a creature that can phase through walls." Brody kicked at a clump of dry earth with the toe of his boot. "Phase through walls. Right. And you think they're building this thing? They said they were the message, the thought, whatever it was. We are building. They're not malicious, Brody. I don't think so. They sounded proud. Like a kid showing his dad a drawing he made. He sighed, a long, weary sound that spoke of too many years dealing with domestic disputes and teenage drunk drivers. Cosmic horror was not in his job description. Look, Jake, I've got half a cow. I'll call the state agricultural guys. They'll say it was coyotes or a prank. You go back up to your hill, get some sleep. Maybe lay off the coffee. He wasn't being mean, just practical. To him, the world was made of things you could touch and see. A fist, a beer bottle, a speeding ticket. Half a cow was a mystery, but a solvable one. An alien signal was the stuff of late-night radio shows. I drove back to the observatory, the setting sun painting the desert in shades of orange and blood. The big dish was aimed at the sky like a giant ear, listening. I felt like I was the only person on the planet who knew a storm was coming. A storm not of wind or rain, but of things dreamed up in a Hollywood basement and given life by hands that knew nothing of fiction. That night I stayed in the control room, a pot of coffee growing bitter on the hot plate. The signal was quiet now, except for the faint looping echo of that scream. It was a placeholder, a bookmark. Around 3 a.m., another call came over the sheriff's dispatch radio, which I kept on for company. It was Deputy Miller. His voice was tight, high-pitched. He was out on Highway 62, the long, lonely stretch of asphalt that cut through the desert. A motorist had called in about a stalled car. Miller had found it. The car was a brand new sedan, lights still on, radio playing softly. Just like the cow, it was cut clean in half. The front half sat on the yellow line, engine ticking as it cooled. The back half was nowhere to be seen. In the driver's seat, a man was still buckled in, his hands on the steering wheel. From the waist up, he was perfectly fine, his face frozen in a mask of confusion. From the waist down, he didn't exist. The silence after Deputy Miller's report was heavier than any static. Brody's voice, when it finally came, had lost its gravelly confidence. It was tight, strained. He just said, "Secure the area. Don't touch anything. I am on my way." I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't coyotes. This was the drawing the kid had made, and it was hanging on the world's refrigerator. I turned back to my console, hands shaking, and started pulling up every bit of data I had on the signal. The mimicry was the key. They had learned our language, our radio frequencies, our broadcast patterns. But their first real attempt at communication wasn't a greeting. It was a reply. They were answering a call we had unknowingly sent out decades ago. The broadcast of the Gaping Maw from 1986 wasn't some global satellite feed. It would have been a local affiliate station, maybe from Albuquerque or El Paso. A weak signal radiating out into space, traveling for decades at the speed of light. To any civilization advanced enough to build interstellar receivers, it would be noise. Unless they weren't more advanced. Not in that way. What if they were masters of one thing, say, gravity manipulation or travel, but complete novices at everything else? A species of savants. They saw a structured signal, a story with images and sounds, and they didn't see art. They saw a blueprint, a historical document, a manual for how to build a powerful guardian or weapon. They saw our nightmares and thought they were our gods. The name Dr. Aris Thorne surfaced in my mind like a body from a deep lake. He was my mentor in college, a brilliant astrophysicist who had been laughed out of the community. His theory was called the cosmic cargo cult. He proposed that any contact with an alien intelligence would likely be a catastrophic misunderstanding. He said we were like an isolated tribe on an island watching a 747 fly overhead. We wouldn't understand aerodynamics or jet fuel. We'd see a big silver bird, a god, and we'd start building effigies of it out of straw and mud, hoping to gain its power. Thorne claimed that our radio signals, our television shows, our movies, were the 747s. We were broadcasting our gods to anyone listening. Everyone called him a crackpot. He lost his tenure and disappeared into obscurity. I found an old email address for him and typed a message, my fingers fumbling on the keys. Dr. Thorne, it's Jake Riley. You were right. It's happening. I hit send, not knowing if the address was still active, if he was even still alive. I spent the next few hours digging through online archives, my eyes burning from the screen's glare. I finally found it, a television guide listing from a defunct El Paso station, the 31st of October, 1986. They had run an all-night horror marathon. The 10 p.m. movie was The Gaping Maw. The plot summary was brief. A group of college students on a weekend getaway are terrorized by a spectral entity that defies the laws of physics. I stared at the words, defies the laws of physics. That's what we were seeing. Not a monster of flesh and blood, but a monster of broken rules. A living glitch. The sun was beginning to rise, casting long shadows from the satellite dishes. The desert was quiet, too quiet. My phone rang, an unknown number. I answered, my heart pounding. Riley, a voice rasped, dry and unused. You said I was right. Tell me what you've seen. It was Dr. Thorne. It started with a cow, I said, the words spilling out of me in a frantic rush. Then a car, a man, cut in half, cleanly. The other half is just gone. Thorne was silent on the other end for a long moment. I could hear him breathing a shallow wheezing sound. Gone. Not vaporized, not atomized, just removed from the equation. Yes, that fits. What about the signal, Jake? They're broadcasting back at us, they're proud. They think they've done something good. They sent a message, a thought, right into my head. We see. We understand. We are building, and they're using the soundtrack from an old horror movie as a carrier wave. Which one? Thorne's voice was sharp, urgent. The gaping maw. A low groan came through the phone. It was a sound of pure intellectual horror. Oh, you poor fools. You poor, stupid, clever apes. You broadcast your demons. And someone answered the phone, the gaping maw. I remember that one. The monster wasn't a creature. It was a spatial anomaly, a pocket of non-reality that looked like a monster. It didn't kill its victims. It erased them. That's what's happening, I whispered. Thorne, what are they? Who are they? They are the Xyla. That's my name for them anyway. I tracked their faint gravitational wake for years. They move between stars, but not in ships as we'd understand them. They fold space. For decades they've been sifting through the radio noise coming from this planet. The densest bubble of structured information they've ever found. They see our stories, our fictions, and they think they're technical manuals. So they're not evil, I said. They're just literal. A literal mind on a cosmic scale is the most dangerous thing in the universe, Jake. They have no concept of fiction. To them, if you can imagine it and broadcast it, it must be a representation of something real. They saw a movie about a monster that could erase things. A monster that was basically a walking hole in the universe. They, with their mastery over space-time, said, We can build that. It's the ultimate cargo cult. They're not building a straw airplane. They're building a real one, without having any idea what flight is or what it's for. Suddenly, the main speakers in the control room crackled to life. It wasn't the screaming loop anymore. It was a new signal, powerful and clear. A wave of serene, parental pride washed over me. Another one of their direct-to-brain messages. And then came the image. Not on my monitors. It appeared in my mind's eye, a schematic made of light and thought. It was a writhing amorphous shape, a silhouette of pure blackness against the backdrop of stars. It had too many limbs, or maybe they were tentacles, and a huge circular mouth that seemed to drink the light around it. It was a child's crayon drawing of a monster, given the terrible power of a god. Then came the final thought, a cosmic birth announcement delivered straight from the creators. Behold, we have replicated your guardian. We have built you a gaping maw. It is a gift. It is on its way. I dropped the phone. Thorne was still talking, but I couldn't hear him. I stumbled to the window that overlooked the valley, towards the small town of Harmony Creek, nestled miles below. The sun was up now, glinting off roofs and windshields. Everything looked normal, peaceful, but I knew it wasn't. A gift was on its way. A monster born from a forgotten videotape was coming to town, and its only purpose was to erase everything it touched. The panic started not with a bang, but with a flicker. Down in Harmony Creek, Maria Sanchez was watering the petunias in front of her diner. She saw it first. The corner of the stop sign at Main and Elm just vanished. One moment it was there, a red octagon of chipped paint and authority. The next, a perfectly square chunk of it was gone, and she could see the bakery window through the hole it left behind. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, and figured the desert heat was finally getting to her. 10 minutes later, Timmy Gable, all of 9 years old, was riding his bike down the sidewalk. He watched as the back half of Mrs. Henderson's prize-winning poodle, Princess Fluffybutt, simply ceased to be. The front half yelped once, tumbled over, and lay still. Timmy fell off his bike and ran home screaming about a magic trick. The maw, as I had started calling it in my head, wasn't moving like an animal. It wasn't stomping through the desert. It was manifesting, like a bug in a computer program. It was a patch of broken reality that was slowly drifting towards the town. From the observatory, I couldn't see the creature itself, only its effects. Through the main telescope focused on the edge of town, I saw a Joshua tree suddenly lose its top third. I saw a patch of road, about 10 feet long, disappear, leaving a neat, rectangular hole in the asphalt. It didn't leave a crater. The earth beneath the road was gone too, a slice taken out of the world. My hands flew across the keyboard, trying to get a lock on the energy signature. It was bizarre. There was no radiation, no heat, no electromagnetism. The only thing my instruments could detect was a profound, localized absence of everything. It was a void, a null space that wore the shape of a B-movie monster. I called Brody again. This time he didn't argue. "Jake," he said, his voice ragged, "what in God's name is happening to my town?" "It's the gift, Brody. The Guardian. It's here." "I've got a dozen calls. A cat, a fire hydrant, the top of the flagpole at the school. It's like things are being bitten off by nothing." "That's exactly what's happening. Brody, you have to evacuate the town now. Get everyone out. Head west, away from it." "Evacuate? On what grounds? A monster that erases things. They'll lock me up." "It's heading for the center of town," I yelled, my voice cracking. "It's slow, but it's moving. You have to believe me." That's when Deputy Miller came on the radio again. He was the first to see it. "Sheriff, I see something. It's by the old water tower. It's not really there." His voice was a choked whisper. "It's like a hole in the air. A big, black, wriggling hole. Oh God." "Miller, get out of there. Now," Brody shouted into his mic. "It's turning," Miller stammered. "It's coming towards me. It's not making any sound." There was a pause. I could hear the deputy's frantic breathing. Then he screamed. It wasn't a long scream. It was short, sharp, and it cut off with a sound like a microphone being unplugged. A perfect sudden silence. Brody called his name over and over. "Miller, Deputy Miller, respond. Kevin, answer me." There was no answer. I swung the telescope towards the water tower. Miller's patrol car was there, parked by the side of the road. The front half of it was gone. The driver's side door stood open, leading to nothing. Deputy Kevin Miller, a man I'd played Little League with, a man with a wife and a baby girl, had been erased. The gaping maw had claimed its first human victim, and it was still hungry. The silence on the police band was absolute. Every deputy, every dispatcher in the county had heard Miller's final broadcast. The disbelief was shattered, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged fear. Brody's voice returned, stripped of all doubt. Down below, I saw the flashing lights of police cars begin to move through the streets. Sirens started to wail, a sound of urgency that was terrifyingly real. Panic, once it took hold, spread like fire in dry grass. People poured out of their houses, confused and scared, looking for an explanation that didn't exist. They saw their neighbors pointing at a fence post that ended in midair, at a car with its back half missing. The truth, as impossible as it was right in front of them. My phone rang again. It was Thorne, Jake. I heard it on the police scanner feed. A deputy is gone. "They're evacuating," I said numbly, watching the tiny chaos unfold below. "But where do they go? How do you run from something that breaks the world?" "You can't," Thorne said, his voice grim. "You can't fight a hole. You can't shoot a paradox. This isn't a problem of force, Jake. It's a problem of information. They sent us a monster based on a bad story. We have to send them a better one." "What are you talking about?" "Send them a story. They're aliens, Thorne. They have a monster eating a town." "Listen to me," he snapped, his voice firm. "The Xyla are mimics. They're copycats. They built them more because they thought that's what we wanted. They thought the story of a monster was a set of instructions. We have to give them new instructions. We have to tell them in a way they can understand that they made a mistake." I stared at the massive 100-foot dish outside my window, the most powerful transmitter in the state. A direct line to the Xyla. How do we tell them? "We interrupt their broadcast," Thorne said, his words coming faster now, filled with a desperate energy. "Their gift is being sustained by a signal from their machine. It's like a projector. The more is the image on the screen. We need to disrupt the projector. We need to broadcast something back at them on the exact same frequency. Something that overwrites their signal. Something that signifies an end." I thought about the old horror movie, about the tropes, the cliches. A monster appears. People scream. The hero fights back. And then, "The end," I whispered. "What's that?" Thorne asked. "The end credits," I said, my mind racing. "Every movie has them. The story's over. The monster is gone. The lights come up. It's a universal concept in our storytelling. An ending. What if we broadcast that?" The end credits from The Gaping Maw. Thorn was quiet for a second. Shake. It's insane. It's poetic. And it might just be the most brilliant idea you've ever had. It's a message of finality. A command to cease. The story is over. They, as literal interpreters of our data, might understand that. They might just turn their machine off. I looked down at Harmony Creek. The moor was at the edge of the town square now. The old gazebo where they held the 4th of July concerts flickered. Half of it vanished. The sirens wailed. It was a race. And the only weapon we had was the ending of a terrible, forgotten movie. "Okay, Thorn, walk me through it," I said, my fingers already flying over the console. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes when you have no choice but to act. The moor is a projection. The Xyla machine is the projector. We need to hijack the signal. Precisely. Thorn's voice crackled through the phone, which I now had wedged between my ear and shoulder. The Xyla aren't broadcasting a continuous stream of new data. That would be inefficient. They've sent the core monster file. Their machine is now just sending a simple, powerful carrier wave that sustains the anomaly. Think of it as the power cord. We need to unplug it. And you think broadcasting the end credits will do that? It's a logical counter-narrative, Thorn explained, his voice taking on the tone of a professor giving a lecture, even in the midst of crisis. The Xyla are operating on a flawed premise. That The Gaping Maw was a documentary. They've enacted the beginning and the middle. The monster appears, the terror begins. They have no concept for the third act. We must provide it. By broadcasting Diane, we are providing the conclusion to the story they started. For a mind that cannot distinguish between narrative and reality, receiving the end of the narrative should, theoretically, terminate the reality they've created. It made a crazy kind of sense. A storybook solution to a storybook problem. I have to find the movie first, I said, my other hand typing furiously into a search engine. I need a digital copy. Something I can feed into the transmitter's modulator. The internet at the observatory was fast, but my search was coming up empty. The Gaping Maw wasn't exactly a classic. It wasn't on any streaming service. It was a piece of analog junk from a bygone era. Jake, you won't find it online, Thorn said, anticipating my problem. It's obscure, but you are in New Mexico. Harmony Creek. Isn't there an old video store in that town? One of those dusty places that never closed down. He was right. Video Palace. It was run by a guy named Stan who refused to believe streaming would ever catch on. It was a relic, a museum of plastic cases and magnetic tape. It was also right in the middle of town, just a few blocks from the square, where the maw was currently unmaking reality. It's in the town, I said, my blood running cold. I'd have to go down there. Here is no other way, Thorn said softly. The file has to come from the original source if possible. The magnetic decay on an old tape might even contain data signatures the Xyla would recognize from the original broadcast. It's the most authentic signal you can send. I looked at the monitors. The evacuation was chaotic. Cars were jamming the westbound highway. But the maw wasn't fast. It was a creeping dread, not a charging bull. I could see its path. It was moving slowly, methodically, down Main Street. Video Palace was on a side street. If I was fast, if I was lucky, I could get in and out before it reached that block. Brody, I said into the radio, switching channels. It's Jake. I need to get into town. His reply was instant, laced with disbelief. Are you insane? I am trying to get people out and you want to go in. I have a plan, Brody. a way to stop this thing. But I need something from Stan's video store. There was a pause. I could imagine him, sitting in his patrol car at a roadblock, watching his world get eaten by a living nightmare. The time for skepticism was long gone. "What do you need?" he asked, his voice flat with exhaustion. "A videotape," I said. "I need a movie called The Gaping Maw." The silence that followed that statement was the sound of a man accepting that the universe had officially lost its mind. "God help us all," Brody finally muttered. "The East Road is clear for now. Be fast, Jake. Be damn fast." The drive down the winding Observatory Road was the fastest I'd ever taken it. My old pickup truck rattled and groaned, kicking up a plume of dust that trailed behind me like a funeral shroud. The sky was a perfect indifferent blue. Down in the valley, the sirens had faded. The evacuation was either complete or had failed. Harmony Creek was a ghost town. Cars were abandoned in the middle of the street, doors hanging open. A child's tricycle lay on its side on a lawn. It was a scene of silent, sudden flight. And over it all hung a palpable wrongness, a subtle hum in the air that felt like a misaligned gear in the engine of the world. I parked a block away from Video Palace and got out, the keys to the shop in my hand. Stan had given a spare to Brody years ago, just in case of emergencies. I don't think either of them had pictured this. The street was deserted to my left at the end of the block. I could see it. The Maw. It was worse up close. It wasn't just a black shape. It was a shimmering, agitated void. It looked like heat haze. Only instead of distorting the air, it was distorting space itself. The corner of a brick building it was passing seemed to bend and flow into it, not breaking, but just ceasing. There was no sound, but I felt a deep, resonant vibration in my chest. A bass note that was shaking my soul. My heart hammered against my ribs. I ran. My boots slapped against the pavement, the only sound in the dead town. I fumbled with the key, jammed it into the lock of Video Palace, and threw the door open. The shop was a time capsule. Walls lined with thousands of VHS tapes, the air thick with the smell of old plastic and decaying cardboard. Faded movie posters for films I'd forgotten existed papered the walls. "Horror section," I muttered, my eyes scanning the handwritten signs. I found it in the back, past comedy and family. The He section was a chaotic mess of lurid covers. I ran my fingers along the spines, my breath catching in my throat. Friday the 13th. A Nightmare on Elm Street. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. My fingers froze. There it was. The Gaping Maw. The cover art was laughable. A terrified woman in a torn nightgown, and behind her, a crude drawing of a shadowy monster with a giant cartoonish mouth. This was it. This ridiculous, stupid thing was the source of all this terror. I grabbed the tape and ran for the front door. As I burst back out onto the street, I saw that the Maw had moved faster than I thought. It was halfway down the block now, consuming the pavement, the sidewalk, the front of the hardware store. And standing between me and my truck was Sheriff Brody. He was next to his patrol car, shotgun in hand, staring at the approaching anomaly. "Brody, what are you doing here? I thought you were at the roadblock," I shouted. He didn't look at me. He just kept his eyes fixed on the thing. Last of the cars just got out. I came back. Couldn't just let it have the place without a fight. Stupid, I know. "T, here is no fighting it," I yelled, holding up the tape. "This is the only way. I have to get back to the observatory." The Maw was 20 yards away. The front of Brody's patrol car began to flicker, to waver like a bad television signal. "Go then," he said, his voice calm. "I'll buy you some time." "Buy me time?" With that, I pointed at his shotgun. "It'll erase you." He finally looked at me and a small, sad smile touched his lips. "Maybe. But it's my town, Jake. A man's gotta stand for something." He racked the shotgun, the sound echoing unnaturally in the warped air. "Now get the hell out of here." I didn't argue. I sprinted to my truck, my lungs on fire. I threw the precious videotape onto the passenger seat and started the engine. In my rearview mirror, I saw Brody raise the shotgun. I saw him fire into the heart of the void. There was no impact, no effect. There was just a flicker, faster than before, and then Sheriff Brody, his car, and a 20-foot section of Main Street were gone. There was only the empty, shimmering air. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor and sped towards the hills, my face wet with tears. The observatory was a sanctuary of humming machines and cold, clean air. I slammed the control room door behind me and ran to the main console, the VHS tape clutched in my hand like a holy relic. Brody's sacrifice had bought me minutes, nothing more. I had to make them count. "Thorne, I've got it!" I shouted into the phone, which I'd left on the desk. Thank God his voice was a strained whisper. "Jake, you have to be fast. Its energy signature is growing. I think the Xyla are pleased with its progress. They might be boosting the signal." Of course they were. They thought their guardian was cleaning house. I looked for a VCR, a piece of technology so ancient, it felt like finding a stone axe. We had one, hooked up to a monitor for some long-forgotten archival project. I jammed the tape in. The machine whirred and clunked. The screen flickered to life, showing a grainy FBI warning. I fast-forwarded, the tape squealing in protest. The movie itself was a mess of bad acting and cheap effects. I didn't care. I spooled forward past the climax, past the final girl's triumphant survival. And then there it was, plain white text on a black background. The end. It was perfect, simple, absolute. "I've got it queued up," I said, my voice steady. "Now I need to patch it into the transmitter." This was the hard part. I wasn't an engineer. I had to physically route the analog output from the VCR into the digital input of the main broadcast modulator. It meant wires, adapters, and a whole lot of prayer. I grabbed a toolbox and ripped the access panel off the main transmitter control unit. It was a terrifying nest of fiber optics and circuit boards. "Jake, you need to match their frequency exactly," Thorne coached me. "And you need to piggyback on their carrier wave. Don't try to overpower it. Try to merge with it. You are not shouting over them. You are changing their words." I found the right input and began splicing wires, my hands slick with sweat. Outside, the world was groaning. The very structure of the observatory was starting to feel soft. The corner of my monitor blurred for a second, then snapped back into focus. The Moor was climbing the mountain. It was coming for the source of the only other signal in the area. It was coming for me. I jammed the last wire into place. A green light on the modulator blinked on. It was a crude, ugly hack, but it was working. "The patch is live," I said. "I am routing the signal." On the main screen, I brought up the broadcast interface. I aimed the 100-foot dish, not at a distant star, but at the empty point in space where the Xyla machine was parked, just beyond the orbit of Neptune. I typed in the frequency, a long string of numbers that was now burned into my brain. My finger hovered over the transmit button. A loud crack echoed through the building. The lights flickered and died. then came back on under the emergency generator. A huge chunk of the observatory's outer dome had just been erased. The moor was here. It was right outside. I could feel that deep soul-shaking vibration through the concrete floor. The air in the room grew cold, and the far wall began to shimmer. "Jake! Now!" Thorne screamed through the phone. I hit the button. A massive surge of power hummed through the building as the transmitter came to life. The VCR whirred, and on the small monitor, the words "The End" played over and over, a silent repeating mantra. That simple two-word message was now hurtling out into the solar system at the speed of light, riding a wave of power strong enough to reach another star. The shimmering on the far wall intensified. A tendril of pure nothingness. A piece of the moor flowed into the room. It didn't break the wall, it just came through it. It slid over a bank of computers, and they vanished, their indicator lights winking out of existence one by one. It was 20 feet away from me. Then 10. I could see into it now. It wasn't black. It was a color my brain couldn't process. A window into a place where the rules of physics were a forgotten rumor. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the end, thinking of Brody's face. And then it stopped. The vibration ceased, the cold receded. I opened my eyes. The tendril of nothingness was flickering violently, like a dying fluorescent bulb. It glitched, pixelated, and then with a sound like a final exhalation of breath, it snapped back, out of the room, out of the world. Through the hole in the dome, I saw the vast, writhing shape of the moor shudder. It broke apart, not into pieces, but into static. For one terrifying second, the fabric of the sky itself seemed to tear, revealing a glimpse of that same impossible non-color behind it. Then it was all gone. The sky was just the sky. The mountain was just the mountain. It was over. The silence that followed was the most profound I've ever known. It was more than the absence of noise. It was the absence of wrongness. The deep, resonant hum that had been vibrating in my bones for hours was gone. The world felt solid again. I stood there in the wrecked control room for a long time, just breathing. The emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows. The hole in the dome revealed a sky full of stars, sharp and clear. I walked to the edge of the hole and looked down at Harmony Creek. The lights were off. The town was dark and silent, a wounded animal sleeping in the valley. The scars were stark. A building with its corner missing. A road that ended in a sheer drop into nothing. Patches of earth where houses and trees used to be, now just barren, scooped-out land. The moor was gone, but what it had taken was gone forever. There was no bringing back the erased. There was no filling in the holes it had left in the world and in our lives. Brody was gone. Miller was gone. Dozens of people who hadn't been fast enough, who had been in the wrong place at the wrong time, were gone. Not dead, but undone. My console beeped, a single soft chime. I walked back to it, my legs unsteady. It was a new signal from the Xyler. It wasn't a wave of emotion or a mental picture. It was a simple text packet, translated into clean, basic English. A testament to how much they had learned in the last few hours. The message contained only 3 words. "We are sorry." I stared at the screen, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Sorry. They were children who had played with a loaded gun they didn't understand, and now they were apologizing for the hole they had blown in the wall. I felt a surge of anger, followed by a wave of immense cosmic pity. They weren't monsters. They were just other. and terrifyingly naive. I sat down in my chair, the exhaustion hitting me like a physical blow. Dr. Thorne was still on the phone line, which had miraculously stayed connected. "Jake?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Jake, are you there? What happened?" "It's gone, Aris," I said, using his first name for the first time. "It worked. Your crazy theory worked." I could hear him weep, a sound of relief so profound it hurt to listen. We talked for a while about the aftermath, about what would come next. The government would come, of course. Men in black suits would quarantine the area. They would create a cover story. A gas explosion, a localized earthquake. The truth was too big, too insane for public consumption. Humanity wasn't ready to know that the universe was not only not empty, but that it was home to beings who could turn our worst nightmares into reality, with the push of a button. Days turned into weeks. The men in suits came. They asked questions, took my data, and told me to sign a document that forbade me from ever speaking about what happened. I was a hero who would never be known, the savior of a town that was now a classified disaster zone. Harmony Creek was fenced off, declared permanently uninhabitable, a monument to our first terrifying lesson in galactic affairs. I still work at the observatory. They let me keep my job, partly as a reward, partly to keep an eye on me. I still point the big dish at the sky and listen. The Xyla are silent now. They haven't broadcast a single pulse since their apology. But I know they're out there. And I know they're watching. They're learning. Sometimes late at night, when the only sound is the hiss of ancient starlight, I think about what other signals are radiating out from our little blue world. I think of all our stories, all our movies, our myths, our gods and our monsters, streaming out into the void. Each one a potential blueprint, each one a loaded gun waiting for a curious child's hand. We try to talk to the universe. The universe, it turns out, is a very literal listener, and the silence now is scarier than the screaming ever was, because now we know what's hiding in it. It's us.